David ran. His feet pounded against the rough terrain, each step a desperate attempt to escape the clutches of death that seemed to be closing in on him. The landscape blurred around him, but he couldn't afford to stop, not even for a moment. His breath came in ragged gasps, his lungs burning with the effort, but the fear driving him was stronger than any physical pain. He ran for his life, knowing that every second counted. Behind him, the shadows of his pursuers loomed large, their intentions clear and deadly. The world around him seemed to close in, the trees and rocks becoming obstacles in his frantic flight. He could almost feel the hot breath of his enemies on his neck, urging him to push harder, run faster. King Saul, consumed by jealousy, wanted him dead. The king's envy had turned into a burning rage, a fire that could only be quenched by David's blood. Saul's once kind eyes were now filled with a murderous intent, his heart blackened by the green-eyed monster of jealousy. David had once been a favored servant, a hero who had slain the giant Goliath, but now he was a fugitive, running from the very man he had once served so loyally. David's heart pounded in his chest, each beat a reminder of the peril he was in. The fear was a constant companion, gnawing at his resolve, but he couldn't afford to give in. He had to keep moving, keep running if he wanted to survive. The weight of his situation pressed down on him, but he forced himself to focus on the path ahead, on the slim hope of escape. He needed help, and he knew just the place. Nob, the city of priests. It was a sanctuary, a place where he might find refuge and aid. The priests of Nob were known for their kindness and hospitality, and David hoped that they would take pity on him in his hour of need. The city loomed in the distance, a beacon of hope in the dark night of his despair.
Ahimelech, I need your help. Saul is after me. His voice was hoarse from the exertion, but the urgency in his tone was unmistakable. He looked into the eyes of the high priest, hoping to find some glimmer of understanding, some sign that he would not be turned away. I have nothing, no food, no weapon. Please help me. The desperation in his voice was palpable, a raw plea for mercy. He was a man stripped of everything, standing on the brink of ruin, and he needed Ahimelech's help to pull him back from the edge.
Ahimelech, the high priest, greeted David. His eyes were filled with concern as he took in the sight of the young man before him. David was a shadow of his former self, his once bright eyes now dull with fear and exhaustion. The high priest could see the toll that the constant running and hiding had taken on him. He could see the fear in David's eyes, a fear that spoke of nights spent in hiding, of days filled with the terror of being discovered. It was a fear that had etched itself into David's very soul, leaving him a haunted man. David, a shepherd boy turned giant slayer, now looked like a hunted animal. The transformation was stark and heartbreaking. The boy who had once faced a giant with nothing but a sling and a few stones now cowered in fear, his spirit battered by the relentless pursuit of a jealous king. Ahimelech listened intently as David told his story, his voice trembling with exhaustion and fear. The high priest could hear the desperation in every word, the raw emotion that threatened to overwhelm the young man. David spoke of the constant danger, the narrow escapes, and the ever-present fear that had become his constant companion. His voice trembling with exhaustion and fear, David recounted the harrowing journey that had brought him to Nob. Each word was a testament to the trials he had faced, the strength he had mustered to keep going despite the odds.
David, you look exhausted and frightened. Ahimelech's voice was gentle, filled with compassion. He could see the toll that the constant running had taken on David, the way it had worn him down to the bone. What has happened to you? The question was simple, but it carried the weight of genuine concern. Ahimelech wanted to understand, to help in any way he could.
I need food, shelter, and most importantly, a weapon to defend myself. David's voice was a mix of desperation and determination. He knew what he needed to survive, and he wasn't afraid to ask for it. And most importantly, a weapon to defend myself. The repetition of his plea underscored the urgency of his situation. He needed to be able to protect himself, to fight back if necessary.
David needed food, he needed shelter, but most importantly, he needed a weapon to defend himself. The high priest could see the truth in David's eyes, the raw need that drove him. He knew that he had to help, that he couldn't turn away a man in such desperate need. But most importantly, he needed a weapon to defend himself. The weight of David's plea hung in the air, a testament to the dire straits he found himself in. Ahimelech knew that he had to act, to provide the aid that David so desperately needed. Ahimelech's heart went out to David. He saw a man who was not just any man, but a man after God's own heart. David was a warrior, a poet, a leader, and a man of deep faith. Yet here he was, hunted and desperate, fleeing from a jealous king who sought his life. Ahimelech saw a good man, a man who had been anointed by the prophet Samuel, a man who had shown great courage and faith in the face of overwhelming odds. But now, David was a fugitive, running for his life from King Saul, who saw him as a threat to his throne. The priest was torn. Could he, a servant of God, offer aid to a fugitive? Could he risk the wrath of the king to help a man he believed to be righteous? The weight of his decision pressed heavily on his heart.
David, I see your desperation. I see the fear in your eyes and the weariness in your soul. But helping you might bring danger to us all. The king's wrath is not something to be taken lightly. How can I be sure of your intentions? How can I know that you do not seek to harm Saul, or that you will not bring his anger down upon us? The risk is great, and the consequences could be dire. I must be certain that you are who you say you are, and that your intentions are pure.
David, sensing the priest's hesitation, pleaded for help. He spoke with a fervor born of desperation, his voice trembling with emotion. He had no ill intentions towards Saul, he swore. He just needed a chance to survive, a chance to continue the mission he believed God had given him. He raised his hand in a solemn oath, his eyes filled with sincerity. I swear, Ahimelech, I mean no harm to Saul. I have no desire to take his throne by force. I just need a chance to survive. Please help me. The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. David's plea was not just for his own life, but for the future he believed God had promised him. He was a man on the run, but he was also a man of destiny, a man who believed he had a purpose to fulfill.
I swear, Ahimelech, I mean no harm to Saul. I just need a chance to survive. Please help me. I'm not asking for much, just a bit of food and a weapon to defend myself. I have no intention of causing harm to anyone. I just need a chance to survive. Please help me. I am a man of faith, just like you. I believe that God has a plan for me, and I'm trying to follow that plan. But I cannot do it alone. I need your help.
Ahimelech relented. The priest's heart was moved by David's earnest plea. He saw the sincerity in David's eyes, the desperation in his voice. He knew that helping David was a risk, but it was a risk he felt compelled to take. He offered David holy bread, sustenance for his journey. The bread was not just food but a symbol of God's provision, a reminder that even in the darkest times, God provides for his people. And then, he did something even more risky. He gave David the sword of Goliath, the giant David himself had slain. The sword was a symbol of David's courage and God's favor, a reminder of the great victory God had given him. The sword of Goliath was not just a weapon but a symbol of God's power and protection. It was a reminder that God had chosen David, that he had given him the strength to defeat a giant. It was a symbol of hope, a reminder that God was with David, even in his darkest hour.
Here, take this bread. It is holy bread, a symbol of God's provision. May it sustain you on your journey. And take the sword of Goliath. It is a symbol of your courage and God's favor. May it serve you well in the battles to come. May it serve you well. May it remind you that God is with you, that he has chosen you, and that he will give you the strength to overcome any obstacle.
Unbeknownst to David and Ahimelech, a pair of eyes watched from the shadows. Doeg the Edomite, a servant of Saul, had seen everything. He saw David's desperation, Ahimelech's compassion, and the exchange of the sword.
This could be my chance to gain favor with King Saul. I must report this act of treason.
Doeg, loyal to Saul, saw an opportunity to win the king's favor. He would report this encounter, this act of treason against the king. David, unaware of the danger lurking nearby, felt a surge of hope. He had food, a weapon, and a moment to catch his breath. But his respite was short-lived. News of Doeg's betrayal reached David. The weight of the news was almost unbearable. Doeg, once a trusted figure, had turned against him, revealing his location to King Saul. David's heart sank as he realized the gravity of the situation. He knew he couldn't stay in Israel. The land that once felt like home was now a dangerous trap. Every corner, every shadow could hide a potential threat. The wilderness, though vast, offered little solace. He had to keep moving, always one step ahead of Saul's relentless pursuit. Saul would stop at nothing to find him. The king's obsession with capturing David had reached a fever pitch. Soldiers scoured the land, leaving no stone unturned. David's every move was shadowed by the looming threat of capture. The once noble king had become a hunter, and David his prey. Desperate, David made a daring, even reckless, decision. He weighed his options, knowing that staying in Israel was a death sentence. The only way to survive was to seek refuge in the most unlikely of places. It was a gamble, but one he had to take. He would seek refuge in Gath, the Philistine city, the home of Goliath. The irony was bitter. Gath, the city of his greatest enemy, now seemed like his only sanctuary. The very thought of it was both terrifying and strangely hopeful. Could he find safety among his enemies?
I have no choice. The words echoed in his mind, a mantra of survival. Every step towards Gath was a step away from certain death. He had to believe that this was the right path, that somehow he would find a way to survive. I must go to Gath. The journey was long and arduous. The dusty road seemed endless, each mile a testament to his determination. With every step he left behind the familiar and ventured deeper into the unknown. It's risky, but it's my only hope. The crossroads of his life had brought him here. The distant city of Gath loomed on the horizon, a beacon of both danger and potential salvation. He had to trust in his instincts, in the hope that this desperate gamble would pay off.
The irony wasn't lost on David. As he walked, he couldn't help but reflect on the twists of fate that had led him here. The slayer of Goliath, now seeking refuge among the Philistines. Life had a cruel sense of humor. He, the slayer of Goliath, was now seeking protection from the giant's people. The memory of that fateful battle was still vivid in his mind, the cheers of victory, the weight of Goliath's sword, and now he was at the mercy of those who had once feared him. Fear gnawed at his heart. Every step closer to Gath was a step deeper into uncertainty. What if they recognized him? What if they saw him as an enemy, a threat to be eliminated? The questions plagued his mind, each one more terrifying than the last. What if he was recognized? The thought was paralyzing. He pulled his hood tighter, hoping to blend into the crowd, but the fear was always there, lurking in the back of his mind. Recognition meant death. What if Achish, the king of Gath, saw him not as a refugee but as a threat, a trophy to avenge their fallen champion? The stakes were impossibly high. Achish's judgment would determine his fate. Would he find refuge or face the wrath of a king seeking vengeance? The answer lay ahead in the heart of enemy territory.